Welcome to the Level Up Your Resume webinar. My name is Steph Graham, and I'm excited to take you through this today. A little about myself before we dive in. I'm a professional career coach and the founder of Steph Graham Consulting. My background is in recruiting and interviewing, also corporate finance at both Uber and Pepsi. I worked in political affairs before I got my MBA, which is where I started my philosophy, which is skills-based interview prep and career development. I provide strategies and confidence to countless clients. I also help organizations with their candidate evaluation and hiring. And I specialize in supporting underrepresented groups, so folks who are neurodivergent, LGBTQ, racial and cultural minorities. I really take a holistic approach to my coaching, and I also lead with empathy. Today's objective: I want to help you understand the purpose and the differences between a resume, LinkedIn profile, and cover letter. We'll also learn how to create a resume that stands out to corporate recruiters and also passes ATS, that Applicant Tracking System, which is the AI that reads resumes. You will also gain practical tips for tailoring your resume for specific job applications. Your resume, LinkedIn profile, and cover letter all together create what I call your candidate profile. These are all incredibly important, but they are different. So the resume is meant to convey your skills, your accomplishments, and your achievements. What have you done that has been relevant to the role you're applying to, and what can you do for them? When recruiters read a resume, they're typically asking themselves, what can you do for me? A LinkedIn profile allows you to share more information about who you are, your passions, why you do the work that you do. LinkedIn offers many sections, and you are 40 times more likely to find an opportunity on that platform if you have every single section of your LinkedIn profile filled out. Recruiters not only will double check profiles if they receive an application or a resume that they like, but they will also search for candidates directly on LinkedIn. So having all of that information filled out with keywords that will put you in the search are all very important when it comes to the job process. Your cover letter is an opportunity for you to expand on some of the achievements in your resume. In your cover letter, think of the top 1 or 2 achievements that are really relevant to the role you're applying for. You know it will stand out, and it's something that they'll want to hear. Now you get to talk about how you did that work. How did you accomplish that goal? How do you approach your work? How do you work on a team? The cover letter allows you to say more about those achievements. Don't just repeat the achievements. Now I want to talk about the difference between a resume and a CV. A CV, or curriculum vitae, is a long document that typically has every aspect and detail of your career. The CV can be up to 20 pages. You want everything in that document. However, in the US, it is much more common that you would use a resume. A resume is a 1 to 2 page document that highlights your accomplishments and achievements. A good rule of thumb is if you have 6 or more years of work experience, a 2-page resume is fine. But if you have 5 or fewer, I would absolutely try to stick to 1 page, especially if you only have 1 to 3 years of experience. 1 page is expected. You may remember a time when 1 page was the golden rule. If you went over 1 page, your resume would not even be read. One of the reasons why that's no longer the case is because jobs used to ask for a bachelor's degree preferred. Now jobs are requiring master's degrees, certifications, a lot of other things. If I'm going to require that of you, I need to give you space to tell me about it. So a 2-page resume, if you have 6 or more years of work experience, is appropriate. Why is the resume so important? It seems like the gatekeeper and the portal to getting a new job. Well, recruiters spend 6 to 7 seconds scanning resumes, which is not a lot of time. And because this is the first thing that they will see representing you and your candidacy, it is so important that they stick with it and read through it beyond that 6 to 7 seconds. Your resume is also your personal marketing tool. This is a document that stands alone. You're not there to be able to explain it or give them clarity. So that is why it is so important that your resume be tailored, very concise, very succinct, but used as a personal marketing tool to tell them who you are and what you can do. ATS, or the Applicant Tracking System, is the gatekeeper. 75% of resumes end up rejected by ATS before even reaching a human. So things like keywords, formatting, and your structure are absolutely critical. Let's talk about the key components of a resume. I want to start with this view so you can see how it looks when it all comes together. This would be a very standard format for a professional resume. We'll break it down into each component, but you can see what it looks like from the top and as you get into your professional experience. Continuing that professional experience and then including your education and also technical skills are very important. So this is a full view of what a resume would look like, all put together if it is formatted correctly. So let's break it down. The first thing you see at the top is contact information. This includes your full name, an email address, your location, and your LinkedIn profile, professional website, or portfolio. I put the phone number as optional because, especially in today's world, we don't want everyone to have access to a lot of our information or data. So I typically do not include my phone number on my resume, but if you would like to, that is completely appropriate. However, that is exactly why it is so important to include the email address and then also your LinkedIn profile so that people can find you and contact you. Additionally, when it comes to location, think about things like not just where you're located, but are you open to remote work? Are you open to relocation? Those are things you can put at the top of your resume that make it easy for someone to quickly understand where it is you're looking and what you're open to. Your professional summary is the next thing on the resume, and it is so important that this is impactful and concise because this will be what encourages a reader to read more. They look at your contact information and then they have this summary. This summary should compel the recruiter or any human reader to continue reading through your resume to want to learn more about your experience. What this means is that the professional summary will be very action-packed. You want to get across a lot of information in a short amount of time while also highlighting accomplishments and achievements that will compel them to read more. So, highly regarded project manager with 12 years of experience managing cross-functional teams and complex programs. Proven expertise in collaborating with key stakeholders to align goals and secure funding for expansive oncology research initiatives. In those two sentences, I've gained so much information about this person, what they do, the type of environment they work in, and even some of their responsibilities. So you see how it's so important to convey a lot of information very quickly up front. Now let's look at an example, a professional summary that is good and a professional summary that is not so good. So let's look at the side that is not so great. I'm a really good executive with lots of experience. I do market analysis and come up with solutions that help businesses grow. I'm great at looking at complex data and giving insights that help executives make decisions. Okay, you've given me information, but it's not super compelling. There's not a lot of detail, and it sounds pretty vague. Let's compare it to the other example. Results-driven executive with 10 plus years of experience, accelerating business growth through data-driven market analysis and innovative strategy development. Adept at translating complex data into actionable insights, directly contributing to a 25% increase in revenue for previous employers. Wow, a world of difference. You're saying effectively the same thing, but in so much more detail, using keywords that align with the industry and job function, and even including an outcome, the contributing to a 25% increase in revenue for previous employers. Once I read that as a recruiter, I want to know more. Tell me more about your experience. Tell me more about what you've been able to do for previous employers. Because again, I'm thinking, what have you done elsewhere that you can do for me? For your work experience, this is the biggest chunk of anyone's resume. You want to start by listing your experience in reverse chronological order. So what that means is you're starting with either your current or most recent job, and then you're working your way all the way back. When you're putting this together, there are some key things you must include. Make sure you have the company name, your job title, and the dates of employment. These are the three things that a recruiter is going to look for to orient themselves before they start reading your bullet points. You also, of course, want to have your key responsibilities and achievements for each of those roles. Because tailoring is so important, one hack that I use is creating a master version of your resume. So when you create that master version, include everything on there. Include impactful bullet points that are quantifiable, but don't limit yourself. Everything you did within that job that is achievement worthy, that is noteworthy, that is something that would be impressive to a potential employer, include it on that master version and let that be 5, 7, 10 pages long. When you go to apply for a job, create a copy of your master, read through it, and start to take things away. So you've already identified what are the top skills that I need for this job I'm applying for. Let me look at my master version and say, okay, under each role, what bullet points demonstrate those skills? Leave those and delete the others. Instead of having to create content each time, you're simply removing what you already have. Of course, you may reword things, something may come up or be more relevant that you end up including, but at the end of the day, you're not having to generate content each time, which is what leads to a lot of that burnout. It is so important to have impactful bullet points in the same way that we talked about having a very impactful and concise executive summary. I want to read some examples that are not so great and some that are very strong, and think about what is the difference. So, manage social media accounts. Okay, sure, that's a responsibility, that's a task. But what if we phrase that like grew social media following by 30% in 6 months through targeted campaigns? Sure, you managed it, but give me that outcome. Well, one thing I did when I was managing it was I was able to grow it by 30% in only 6 months using targeted campaigns. I have insight into how you did this, what the outcome was, and this was all through your management of the account. One thing a lot of people run into is because we do our jobs every day, we don't always see the value that it holds. Think about not just what you've done, but what is the impact? And sometimes it's easier to come up with if you think, what if I hadn't done that? What would we not have achieved if I hadn't been able to grow that social media following? Additionally, responsible for customer service. Okay, but improve customer satisfaction scores by 15% by implementing a new feedback system and training team members on conflict resolution techniques. Again, that gives me so much more insight into how you do the work that you do, into the outcome of that work. So you see that fleshing out that bullet point is a lot more beneficial for you because you're conveying more information and you're showing the impact. Now, some people say, I don't have a super quantifiable job. I used to work in finance, so I have numbers for days. But for some people, that's simply not how their work is done. So let's look at this next example. Assisted with event planning. That could sound like coordinated a 200-person corporate event, managing logistics and vendor contracts. While you don't have a statistic like growing a social media following through targeted campaigns or improving scores, sizing things out by saying coordinated a 200-person corporate event gives me a lot of insight. It's one thing to plan an event for 20 people. That's very different than a corporate event for 200 people. So in any area where you can size things out for the recruiter or give them any sort of quantification, that is helpful. For your education section, this is incredibly important as well. It typically goes right after your professional experience section. Education is specifically for degrees earned or degrees you are working towards, but specifically degrees. You want to make sure you're including the institution names and graduation dates. If you are someone who has over 15 years of work experience, graduation dates aren't as important, especially if you're accounting for something like potential ageism in hiring. It's okay to remove those graduation dates. You can also include relevant coursework or academic achievements if it's applicable, and this might be more applicable for folks who are maybe 1 to 3 years out of college, where drawing on your coursework or projects you worked on is relevant and is the most experience you have. I want to really drive home the fact that the education is only geared towards degrees and not certifications. There are certain courses, like a 6-month course through MIT or Wharton, and people try to put things like that in the education section, when in reality, that is not a degree. Recruiters will see that and they will certainly not like it. A lot of times they feel like people are trying to make it look like they have more education than they do. And so I highly recommend do not put that in the education section. That is a quick way to get your resume thrown out. You may remember when I showed the contact information slide, I had my name, comma, MBA. Don't forget to include your post-nominal letters at the top of your resume. If there are jobs that require an MBA or a PhD, a JD. Having that in the contact section immediately tells recruiters upfront what advanced degrees you have. So don't be afraid to add those post-nominal letters, but of course that also the detail of getting that degree belongs in the education section. So I want to share an example of what education can look like in a few different ways and formats. So just like the job experience section, this is in reverse chronological order. So the most recent degree that I earned was getting my MBA. So I have that listed up top with the school name, the degree name, and also the dates. Now here I've listed out a few things to show an example of coursework or relevant work that I did or projects I did that could be relevant for a job I'm applying for. So starting with being selected for a highly coveted leadership immersion capstone, getting the grade of a high pass. I focused on leadership and management in my MBA, and the capstone is something I focused on leadership and management in my MBA, and this would be something that really drives that home. I was also the principal consultant and team lead for the student teams achieving results, where we worked with a local startup and helped put together a viable marketing strategy. And then also noting that years later, they received a $26 million investment. This is a great thing to share because one, it talks about the work that I've done on a team as a lead consultant working with a startup, and then giving that outcome of, yes, even though I wasn't with the company years later, that marketing strategy allowed them to get through that startup phase to the point where they were able to get a $26 million investment. That's amazing. I've also included some other things I've been a part of, so doing a global immersion elective in East Asia, and also presenting at the National Black MBA Case Competition for 2 different years. This is a really great example of something that does belong in education. However, it is a bit different than a degree earned. So during my MBA, I studied at the Rotterdam School of Management in the Netherlands as part of the MBA Abroad Exchange. So the program that I was in was a degree earning program. It would be the same program that I would be a part of if I lived in the Netherlands and wanted to get my MBA. Additionally, the coursework that I did, I had to meet their expectations of being able to pass. And additionally, had I not passed my MBA Abroad Exchange work, I would not have been able to get my MBA from UNC. So this was essential to me getting the degree. It's not a certification, it's not separate, it's a part of that degree's coursework. So that does get included in my education section. And then under that, I have my bachelor's degree, and then a few things to note: an academic achievement award, and also being a delegate to the UN. So this is a more complicated way that this is slightly more complicated than your average education section, but I wanted to provide a visual example of what it could look like depending on what your background is. Because we know keywords are so important in a resume, having your skills listed out is essential. So you want to make sure you're always listing the relevant technical skills. Also, don't forget to include your soft skills. Most of us work on teams, being able to work cross-functionally to translate technical terms to non-technical people. Soft skills matter. Do not leave them out. You also want to include areas of expertise or your core competencies, and also systems knowledge. There are a lot of roles that will specifically say requires experience with SQL or with Google Suite. So make sure that you are listing those things if you do have that experience. ATS is going to be scanning for these terms, and it also helps the human reader understand what you're capable of. There are a few things on your resume that are considered optional. So first, things like certifications and licenses. If you have any, you absolutely want to include them, especially if they are relevant to the role. Any professional associations or memberships that you have, you can include relevant volunteer work, projects that you've worked on, publications or presentations, also any awards or honors. Now, number one, this is always going to be based on what is relevant to the role you're applying to, and also making sure that if you have space, you need to prioritize things like your work experience, also details in your education. This optional section may or may not be relevant based on who you are. The Applicant Tracking System, or ATS. Most companies use AI and machine learning to scan candidates' resumes, but what does that really mean? So what is ATS? It's software that's used by employers to collect, sort, and rank job applications. It acts as the gatekeeper between you and the hiring manager. One thing a lot of people don't know about ATS is while it does reject up to 75% of resumes, it also ranks the resumes that it does accept. And what that usually looks like is a recruiter looking at all of the accepted resumes, and they may look at the top 10%. If they don't find who they're looking for, they may expand that to the top 20%. But the point here is if you are not tailoring your resume well enough, even if you're getting past ATS, you may be ranking in the bottom 10%. And if you're in that bottom 10%, you likely will not get the callback. So having a very well-tailored resume to that job is essential to not just get through ATS, but also get ranked high enough based on everybody else in that candidate pool. Some tips for passing ATS. Use standard section headings like work experience and education. Include keywords from the job description. Use a clean and simple format, even when you think about your fonts. So using something like Arial or Calibri is a really great option. Times New Roman is classic, not my personal favorite, but an option. You should also absolutely be saving it as a PDF file, never a Word document or a Google Doc to actually send off to someone. And some of those don'ts. Don't use tables, images, graphics. ATS will not read those. Do not include information in the headers or footers. It will also not be able to read those. If you're using any sort of unusual fonts or characters, or if you're submitting, say, a scanned copy of your resume, that format will not work. So don't try to get too creative or go off script. ATS has a limited understanding of what a resume should look like, and if you are veering too far off, you will likely get rejected. Let's talk about some faux pas and green flags when it comes to a resume. Some of the faux pas: never include a photo on your resume. Don't use passive language. Always think about being action-packed with the language that you're using so that you can be impactful. Do not overly format or design. I work with people in all different industries, and a lot of the folks who work in design, I understand. Because you do design, you want to demonstrate part of that in your resume, and I understand. But just keep in mind, you don't want to overly format to the point where ATS cannot read it. You also don't want to omit dates when it comes to your work experience because recruiters really want to understand and be able to visualize your career. And you also never want to submit a resume that is more than 2 pages. Some must-dos on your resume. You must include your contact information and your LinkedIn URL. Absolutely use those action verbs to make sure it's very impactful. Tailor each bullet point to the skills and job responsibilities in that job description. You need to triple check your grammar and spelling. And then also make sure that your summary is concise and informative. Some final tips I want to leave you with. Keep your resume updated. A lot of people will get into a job and just forget to keep updating that resume, but it's really helpful if you update it throughout your career, even when you're not looking for a job. So think about what have you been doing, what are some of the accomplishments that you've had, and have a running version of your resume where you're adding those things. You also want to get feedback from a lot of different people. Ask mentors, coaches, peers to review your resume. Recruiters are going to all be different people, so getting as many different perspectives as you can will allow you to better understand how someone might interpret your resume. And so getting as many people to give you that feedback allows you to see what you need to change based on how people might respond. Also, practice tailoring. So the more customized you are, the better your chances of success. So practice tailoring different bullet points or your overall resume to different jobs. And like I mentioned, to help avoid burnout, create that master version of your resume that allows you to just remove instead of generating new content each time. Thank you so much for joining my Level Up Your Resume webinar. Feel free to give me a follow on Instagram. If you are interested in learning more about my resume and LinkedIn services, you can check out the Resume Hub on my website. If you're interested in coaching or just learning more, you can schedule a complimentary consultation. Let me know in the comments if there are other questions you have about your resume. I'm looking forward to creating more videos to answer your questions and meet your needs.